I never thought a single evening run to the grocery store could change anything in my life. Nothing ever really changes in Willow Creek, anyway. It's one of those small American towns where the streets go quiet by 9 p.m., where the diner closes early on weekdays, and where people somehow know what you bought before you even get home. I grew up here, worked here after finishing community college, and honestly believed I'd stay unnoticed forever. At 24, my life felt like a long hallway with identical doors, predictable, quiet, and small. That night, though, something shifted. I'd stopped by Murphy's Market to grab coffee filters and some frozen meals. I wasn't looking for anything or anyone. I just wanted to get in and out before the storm rolled in. The air smelled like rain and warm pavement, that heavy summer scent that sits low over the town. As I pushed open the door, I saw her for the first time. She was standing in the produce section, turning a peach over in her hand like she was testing it for secrets. Dark hair falling in loose waves past her shoulders. A light denim jacket. Sharp eyes, calm but aware. She wasn't from around here. Or at least, she didn't move like someone who'd been ground down by this town's routines. There was something intentional in her posture, like she'd lived enough life to know exactly how to stand her ground. She must have felt me staring, because she looked up. For a second, her eyes landed on mine. Not a smile, just a small, polite acknowledgement. I'd like to say I played it cool, but I did the exact opposite. I nodded too quickly, grabbed a basket I didn't even need, and pretended to examine a stack of bananas like I was auditioning for a fruit inspector job. I didn't expect to see her again. But when I rounded the corner into the coffee aisle, she was there, comparing 2 bags of beans with a seriousness that made me weirdly nervous. I'd seen attractive women before, sure, but there was something different about her. Older, definitely. Maybe early to mid-30s. Confident in a way that made me hyper-aware of every awkward angle my body could make. She glanced at me again before speaking. "Do you know if this brand tastes burnt?" she asked, holding up a dark bag with minimalist packaging. My brain short-circuited. I froze, then finally managed. I think so. Maybe. I don't know. I drink whatever's cheapest." "Smooth. Very smooth." She laughed, not loudly, not mockingly, just a light, almost relieved sound. "Fair enough. Sorry. I'm new around here. Trying to figure out which brands won't ruin my morning." New. So I was right. I cleared my throat, trying to put the pieces of a normal sentence together. "If you're new, you should try the local stuff. Harper's Roasters. It's not bad." She lifted a brow. "Look at you, the local expert." I shrugged, but inside I was panicking because she was talking to me like we were equals and not like she was, well, 10 or so years older and effortlessly put together. We exchanged a few more lines. Nothing deep, just small talk about the town, the weather, the bad cell service, but I remember all of it clearly. I remember the way she carried herself, steady, warm, self-assured. Women my age never gave off that kind of presence. At checkout, she ended up in front of me again. She turned slightly and said, "Thanks for the coffee advice." Her voice trailed off, prompting my name. "Evan," I answered. She repeated it once under her breath, like tasting it. "I'm Lena." Lena, the kind of name that sticks to your ribs. When she left, I watched her walk out into the rain, slip into a dark blue sedan, and drive away. No dramatic moment. Nothing cinematic. Just the quiet realization that something about her had unsettled a part of me I didn't know existed. I didn't expect to think about her again. But that night, lying in bed, listening to the storm tear across the town, her face kept flashing in my mind. Not in a romantic way. Not yet, but with curiosity. A kind of magnetic pull I couldn't name. People don't just appear in Willow Creek. Not people like her. And I should have known. Nothing that feels like that ends up being simple. I didn't see Lena again for a week. In a town like Willow Creek, that almost felt impossible. New people stand out here, especially adults who move in alone. Usually, they end up becoming gossip within 24 hours. Where they work, why they came, how long they plan to stay, whether they're divorced or just escaping something. People in small towns never admit they're nosy. They just call it being neighborly. But somehow, Lena slipped under that radar. No one mentioned her. No whispers at the diner. No, "Did you see that new woman on Maple?" from the post office ladies. Nothing. I started thinking maybe she was just passing through. By the 6th day, I had almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole encounter, that she was just a momentary glitch in my routine. But the universe must have been listening, because the next afternoon, I saw her again, this time at the old community library. I was there helping Mrs. Dorsey, the librarian, move boxes of donated books. It wasn't my job, but I'd been doing odd tasks around the library since high school, mostly because I liked the quiet, and partly because Mrs. Dorsey liked to feed me banana bread and ask why I was still single. I was lifting a box onto a table when I heard the door creak open. When I turned, Lena was standing there, brushing a strand of hair away from her cheek, the same denim jacket tied around her waist. She scanned the room slowly before her gaze landed on me, recognition flickering in her eyes. "Oh," she said, smiling a little. "Coffee expert." I felt my face heat up instantly. That's not a title I deserve. Too late. You're stuck with it. She walked closer, taking in the dusty shelves, the stacks of boxes, the flickering old lights overhead. Then she noticed the card catalog drawers and let her fingers glide over one. "I haven't seen one of these in years," she said. "This place is charming." Charming wasn't the word I'd use. Outdated, maybe. Half forgotten. But the way she said it made the library seem different somehow, softer. "What brings you here?" I asked. "I'm trying to find a quiet space to work." She tapped the cover of the notebook she carried. "The new house has no furniture yet, and the echo is driving me insane." "New house?" I repeated. "So you're staying in Willow Creek?" She tilted her head, curious. Was that hard to believe? "People don't move here on purpose," I admitted before I could stop myself. She laughed. "Fair point. We talked a little, just surface stuff at first." She'd moved from Portland. She was taking time off work. She needed a reset. She didn't say from what, and I didn't ask, though the question sat between us like a shadow. At some point, Mrs. Dorsey approached with her usual soft shuffle. Her eyes widened when she saw Lena. Not because of her appearance, though Lena definitely stood out, but because newcomers were rare enough to feel like wildlife sightings. "Can I help you, dear?" Mrs. Dorsey asked. "I was hoping to get a library card," Lena replied. Mrs. Dorsey glanced at me, then back at her. "Are you a friend of Evan's?" Lena smiled. "Acquaintance. We met at the grocery store." For some reason, that word, acquaintance, stung a little. Not because I wanted it to be more, but because I'd thought about her more than an acquaintance should. As she filled out the paperwork, I went back to sorting the books. She joined me afterward, offering to help. I told her she didn't owe me free labor, but she insisted, saying she needed something to distract her mind. We ended up sitting on the floor between two shelves, flipping through old donated novels. She opened a tattered copy of a romance paperback and winced. "Why is every man in these books named Blake or Trent?" she joked. I grinned. "Better than the names in my high school yearbook." She glanced at me. "Let me guess. There were at least 3 guys named Cody." 4, I corrected. We laughed. It was easy, too easy. Sitting there in the dust, surrounded by old stories and yellowed pages, it felt like the world had narrowed to just the two of us. The air between us shifted, not romantic yet, but something close to trust. Openness. Like we were strangers who accidentally skipped a few steps. When she finally stood to leave, she hesitated. "Thank you for letting me hang around." "Anytime," I said. She gave a small, thoughtful smile. "Maybe I'll see you again, coffee expert." And just like that, she was gone again, slipping back into the sunlight outside, leaving the library feeling strangely empty in her absence. But this time, I knew it wasn't a one-time thing. Something about the way she said maybe felt like a promise. I just didn't realize how complicated that promise would become. Over the next couple of weeks, Lena became a quiet, recurring presence in my life. Never planned, never expected, but always leaving some kind of imprint. She showed up at the library every few days, sometimes to write, sometimes to read, sometimes just to sit by the window with her headphones in. We didn't always talk, but any time we did, the conversations had an ease I didn't recognize from most people my age. It wasn't flirting, not yet. It was connection. Genuine, slow, unforced. At least, that's what I told myself. One Friday afternoon, I stopped by Harper's Cafe to grab an iced latte. I don't usually order iced anything unless it's July and the humidity is trying to kill me, but I'd barely slept the night before thanks to the construction workers drilling outside my apartment. When I walked in, there she was, sitting alone at a small table near the back, her notebook open, a pen tucked behind her ear, hair pulled into a messy bun. She looked different like that. Softer. Younger. even though I knew she wasn't young the way I was. She noticed me immediately. Her lips curved into a half smile. "Didn't take you for an iced latte guy," she said. I pulled out the chair opposite her without thinking too hard about it. "Didn't take you for a mind reader." She shrugged. "I pay attention." That line did something to my stomach. I ignored it. We talked for almost an hour. She told me she used to be a graphic designer, but had burned out after years of nonstop freelance work. I told her I worked part-time at a hardware store and did odd jobs around town. She teased me for being everyone's favorite local helper, and I didn't admit how true that was. At some point, a group of high school kids burst into the cafe, loud and chaotic. They recognized me, small-town problems, and waved. One of them, a senior I'd helped with math tutoring, called out, "Evan, who's the woman?" I felt my entire soul leave my body. Lena raised her eyebrows, clearly entertained. "She's, just a friend," I sputtered, instantly regretting every choice that led me to that sentence. The kids exchanged ridiculous winks and whisper laughed as they walked away. I braced myself for Lena's teasing, but she simply tilted her head. "Friend?" she asked lightly. "I mean, yeah? I don't know. Are we?" Her gaze softened. "I'd like to think so." Something warm spread through my chest. Something dangerous. We parted ways shortly after, but as she stepped outside, she turned back. "Evan," she said, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You don't have to be so nervous around me." I opened my mouth to protest, but she gave a knowing smile and headed down the street. And just like that, she lodged herself a little deeper into my brain. 2 days later, I learned more about how the town saw her, or rather, how they were beginning to. I was at the hardware store when Mrs. Coleman came in, whispering like she was delivering state secrets. "You know that new woman?" she began. I played dumb. "Which one?" "The 30-something with the pretty hair. Lives in the old Harper place. I saw her having coffee with you." My stomach twisted. "Okay. Well, I heard she's divorced. Or left someone. Or maybe got fired from a big job in the city. People only move to towns like ours when they're hiding something." I gripped the edge of the counter. Maybe she just wanted a change. Mrs. Coleman gave me a look that suggested she knew better. "Just be careful." Careful. Like Lena was a danger. The moment she left, I felt a strange, protective anger rise in me. I hated how quickly people tried to dismantle newcomers, how they turned lives into puzzles they had no right solving. It made me want to defend Lena, someone I barely knew further than a handful of conversations. But the truth was, I did want to know more. Not for gossip reasons. For real ones. The turning point came a week later, on a windy, cold Saturday evening. I'd stopped by the library to drop off a toolbox I'd borrowed. The place was closed, but I noticed a light on inside, a small glow coming from the reading corner. I peered through the window. Lena was sitting there, knees pulled to her chest, staring at something on her phone with a hollow expression I'd never seen on her before. Her shoulders were tense, her breathing uneven. She looked broken, or close to it. Without thinking, I knocked gently. She startled, then quickly tried to wipe her face before coming to unlock the door. "Evan," she said, voice thin. "Hey, sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. Are you okay?" For a moment, she stood there, gripping the doorknob like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Then she whispered, "No, not really." And just like that, the space between us changed again. Deeper this time, heavier, realer in a way I wasn't prepared for. I couldn't stop thinking about her the day after our first real conversation at the bookstore. Her laugh echoed in my mind, warm and knowing, like she had seen all the chaos life could throw at someone and still found a reason to smile. I kept replaying every word, every subtle gesture, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, how she tucked her hair behind her ear absent-mindedly while talking. I was obsessed, but in a way I hadn't been with anyone before. She called me that evening, and my chest tightened in anticipation. Her voice was calm, confident, yet soft enough to make my heart race. "Hey, want to grab coffee tomorrow?" she asked. I tried to sound casual, but I'm sure my excitement leaked through. "Yeah, I mean, absolutely," I stammered. She laughed lightly. "Great. Let's meet at that little cafe near the park at 10. The next morning, I got there early, pacing nervously outside the cafe. When she arrived, wearing a simple blouse and jeans, looking effortlessly put together, I nearly forgot how to breathe. She smiled, and all my nerves melted into something lighter. Anticipation, curiosity, something electric I couldn't name. We sat down, ordered coffee, and the conversation flowed as if we'd known each other for years. She talked about her work, her travels, her love for old jazz records. I shared stories from my small-town life, the awkward misadventures, and the little victories that mattered to me. She listened intently, asking questions that made me feel heard and seen. I realized, halfway through, that I hadn't felt this level of connection with anyone my age, or really anyone at all. After coffee, we walked through the park. Leaves had started turning, and the air smelled faintly of wood smoke from chimneys. She told me about her favorite hidden spots in town, a tiny art gallery, a quiet bookstore, a diner with the best apple pie she'd ever tasted. I tried to memorize everything, wanting to experience this world she lived in, even if just for a little while. Weeks went by, and our meetings became routine, though never mundane. We shared dinners, movie nights, and long drives with no destination. She introduced me to people in town, old friends, colleagues, and even her dog, a spirited golden retriever named Benny who immediately took a liking to me. Each meeting, each shared joke, each brush of her hand across mine built a tension I could no longer ignore. One evening, she invited me over to her apartment. It was cozy, with shelves full of books, vintage posters on the walls, and a soft glow from string lights. We cooked dinner together, laughter spilling into every corner. At one point, our hands brushed while chopping vegetables, and I felt a spark that made me freeze. She looked at me, eyes searching mine, and the silence was heavy but not uncomfortable. Finally, she said softly, "You know, I like you. More than I probably should." My heart skipped a beat. I wanted to say everything back, but words failed me. I just nodded, feeling the heat rise in my chest. She smiled, took my hand, and led me to the couch. We sat close, not touching, yet the space between us felt charged, electric. We talked for hours, sharing fears, past mistakes, moments of shame and pride. It was raw, intimate. I realized she wasn't just older, she was wiser, more patient, more understanding. And I, despite my youth, felt like I could be myself completely with her. No masks, no pretenses, just honesty. At the end of the night, as I walked home under the streetlights, I felt a mixture of exhilaration and fear. She had unlocked something in me I didn't know existed. But I also knew the reality. We were different ages, from different chapters of life. Yet, something told me that didn't matter, not tonight, not yet. By the next week, our relationship deepened. Flirtation turned into subtle touches, glances that lasted too long, and inside jokes that only we shared. I felt alive in a way I hadn't before, but I also felt the weight of the unspoken. Society wouldn't understand us, and even I had moments of doubt. But every time I looked into her eyes, every time she smiled, I pushed the doubts aside. It wasn't perfect, of course. There were moments of tension, small disagreements, and misunderstandings. But we navigated them together, learning to communicate in ways I'd never experienced. With her, I was growing, not just in affection, but in understanding, in patience, in confidence. I realized that this wasn't just a fling or a crush. This was the beginning of something deeper. And yet, the question lingered every night as I fell asleep. Could someone like her truly care for someone like me? Could we bridge the gap of experience, of age, of expectation? I didn't know. All I knew was that I wanted to try. And somehow, that desire was enough to keep me coming back, day after day, for her laughter, her insight, her warmth, and the way she made me feel alive. By the time summer rolled in, our relationship had settled into a rhythm that felt both exciting and comforting. I still couldn't believe how much our lives had intertwined in just a few months. She had introduced me to her favorite cafe for brunches, hidden hiking trails just outside town, and even a small local jazz club where she knew the owner. Every place carried a hint of her personality, and being there made me feel closer to her, as if I was being invited into her world piece by piece. One evening, she suggested a spontaneous road trip to a neighboring town. I remember feeling a mix of thrill and nervousness. Her spontaneity was intoxicating, and I craved it even when it scared me. We packed a few bags, loaded her car with snacks, and drove with the windows down, the wind messing up our hair, jazz music filling the small cabin of the car. She laughed at my attempts to navigate, teasing me when I took wrong turns, but letting me drive anyway. There was a freedom in that drive, a feeling of being untethered from all the rules and expectations that had weighed me down before I met her. We arrived at a quiet lake by sunset, the water reflecting shades of pink and gold. We set up a small picnic, sitting close on a blanket, sharing food, stories, and laughter. At one point, she leaned back, letting her head rest against my shoulder. I could feel her warmth, her scent, and I realized that this closeness was no longer just comfortable. It was necessary. I wanted to stay in that moment forever, feeling the connection deepen. That night, back at her apartment, the dynamic between us shifted slightly. The teasing and laughter gave way to more serious conversations. She told me about past relationships, the heartbreaks, and mistakes she had learned from. I listened, feeling the gravity of her experiences. There was a vulnerability in her I hadn't noticed before, a softness that made me care for her even more. I shared parts of my life I had never told anyone, admitting insecurities and fears I usually buried. Somehow, it felt safe to do so with her, as if she understood me without judgment. As the weeks went on, our bond strengthened, but so did the whispers of doubt in my mind. Friends my age didn't understand. "She's so much older," they'd say, though mostly in jest. I tried to shrug it off, but sometimes I couldn't help feeling like an outsider in her world. Despite that, she always reassured me with a touch, a glance, or a simple, "I like being with you." Those words, though simple, became my anchor. One day, we attended a small-town art festival together. Walking among the booths and performers, holding hands, I felt a surge of pride. Being with her felt like a secret privilege, a treasure I didn't want to lose. She bought me a small hand-carved figurine, something quirky and thoughtful, just like her. "For your collection," she said with a wink. I laughed, realizing I didn't even have a collection, but I would now, just to remember this moment, to remember her. But life, as always, wasn't without complications. One evening, she received a call from her ex, someone I hadn't known about before. Her face hardened, her laughter gone for the first time in weeks. She reassured me it was nothing, but I could sense the tension. That night, we argued. Not loudly, not angrily, but with a raw honesty that left both of us vulnerable. I admitted my insecurities, my fears of losing her, while she explained her past, her boundaries, and her expectations. It wasn't easy, but it felt real, and somehow, the argument brought us closer, not apart. By late summer, our relationship had become a series of shared adventures, intimate moments, and deep conversations. We had learned each other's rhythms, our quirks, and our fears. I had started to see the world differently, through her eyes, with patience, curiosity, and a sense of wonder I hadn't had before. And though there were moments of doubt, I realized that being with her had changed me, shaped me in ways I didn't expect, and made me believe that love, even unconventional love, could be real and sustaining. Every night, when I walked home under the streetlights, I thought about the gap between us, not just the years, but the life experiences. And every night, I decided it didn't matter. What mattered was this: her presence, her voice, her smile, and the way she made me feel alive. We were different, yes, but together, we were something new, something neither of us could have anticipated, yet something neither of us wanted to let go of. By early autumn, our relationship had grown into a rhythm that felt almost natural, though still thrilling. Each meeting with her was a mixture of comfort and excitement, as if we were always discovering new layers of each other. I had started noticing little things: how she hummed softly when she was focused, the way her eyes lit up when talking about music, the quiet confidence in her movements that made her seem both approachable and untouchable at the same time. One Saturday morning, she suggested we visit a local farmer's market. I loved the spontaneity of it, the way she seemed to find joy in small, simple things. We wandered through rows of colorful vegetables, handmade crafts, and fresh pastries, tasting samples and laughing at each other's reactions. She bought a bouquet of wildflowers and handed me one, teasing, "You need a little color in your life." I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest I couldn't quite put into words. Later that week, she invited me to help her set up for a charity event at the town library. I was hesitant at first. Events and social obligations had always made me nervous, but being around her made everything easier. We worked side by side, arranging tables, hanging decorations, and chatting quietly in between tasks. At one point, she leaned close, whispering a joke only I would understand, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. It was moments like these that made me realize how deeply I had fallen for her, not just her appearance or charm, but the way she made me feel truly seen. As our connection deepened, we started sharing more personal aspects of our lives. She told me about her career setbacks, moments of regret, and the lessons she had learned along the way. I shared my own struggles, feeling lost, uncertain about my path, unsure of my place in the world. In those conversations, I began to understand her on a level beyond attraction. I admired her resilience, her ability to navigate life with grace, and I found myself growing alongside her. One evening, she surprised me with a small getaway, a cozy cabin a few hours away from town. We spent the weekend hiking, cooking together, and sitting by the fireplace, talking late into the night. I remember looking at her as she traced patterns in the firelight, feeling a pull stronger than anything I had experienced before. When she reached for my hand, I didn't hesitate. Her touch was grounding, reassuring, and the first time I felt truly like I belonged. But not everything was perfect. The difference in our ages and experiences occasionally created tension. I sometimes felt insecure, questioning whether I was enough for her, whether she truly valued what we had. And she, in turn, had moments of frustration when I acted impulsively or misunderstood her intentions. Yet, each disagreement ended with honest conversations, apologies, and compromises. In a way, those conflicts strengthened our bond, proving that we could navigate the complexities of our connection. One particularly challenging evening, she opened up about her fears of judgment, from friends, family, and society at large. I listened, holding her hand, feeling her vulnerability, and I realized that love sometimes required courage, not just in facing the world, but in being unapologetically yourself with another person. I reassured her that what we had was real, and in that moment, I saw a softness in her eyes that made my chest ache. As the season changed, so did our intimacy. Physical closeness became a natural extension of our emotional connection. Simple touches, lingering hugs, and shared glances conveyed more than words ever could. I learned to read her signals, to understand when she wanted comfort, conversation, or just my presence. In return, she became attuned to my needs, offering support and encouragement in ways that felt effortless yet profound. By the end of autumn, I could no longer imagine my life without her. She had become my confidant, my guide, my anchor, and my greatest source of joy. Each day with her was a lesson in patience, understanding, and love. I had learned that despite the differences in our age and experiences, the connection we shared transcended those boundaries. And though the future remained uncertain, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I wanted her in my life, fully, completely, for as long as she would let me. Winter had arrived, and with it came a certain quiet intimacy between us. The town was dusted with snow, the streets glistening under the soft glow of streetlights, and the air held that crisp, clean scent that made everything feel new. I loved this season, partly because it gave us more time indoors, close together, where the outside world seemed distant and irrelevant. One evening, she invited me over for what she called a cozy movie night. I arrived to find her apartment transformed, string lights casting a warm glow, blankets piled on the couch, and the smell of cinnamon and baked apples filling the air. She greeted me with a smile that made my heart pound, and I realized how much I had come to rely on the sight of that smile to anchor my days. We watched an old classic film, one she loved as a kid, and I noticed how nostalgic it made her. She shared stories from her childhood, the challenges she faced, and the moments of joy she held on to. I listened, captivated, feeling honored that she trusted me with these pieces of her past. As the night wore on, we huddled closer under a blanket, and I felt the electricity of her presence, the warmth of her hand in mine. Around Christmas, she took me to a small local holiday market. Twinkling lights adorned every booth, the scent of roasted chestnuts filled the air, and carolers sang softly in the background. We wandered together, buying little trinkets, tasting sweet treats, and laughing at our clumsy attempts at ice skating. At one point, she grabbed my hands, spinning me around, and for a moment, It felt like the world had disappeared except for the two of us. But winter also brought challenges. I had started feeling the pressure of our age difference more acutely. Some nights, I lay awake worrying whether I was truly what she wanted in the long term. She, in turn, had her own insecurities, past experiences that made her cautious, fears of being judged for being with someone younger. Yet, instead of creating distance, these moments led to deeper conversations. We talked about our hopes, our fears, and what we wanted from each other. Each discussion brought clarity, understanding, and a sense of mutual respect. One snowy evening, she surprised me with a homemade dinner. The effort she put into every detail, the table setting, the candles, the thoughtful menu, was overwhelming. After dinner, we sat by the window, sipping wine, watching snowflakes drift lazily to the ground. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and I realized that I had begun to see her as home, not just a person I loved, but a place where I could be myself completely. As the months passed, our relationship deepened further. We had begun to plan small trips, meet each other's friends and families, and even discussed future aspirations together. Despite the occasional awkward moments and minor disagreements, the foundation we built was strong, based on trust, communication, and a profound emotional connection. One night, while we sat by the fireplace, she looked at me seriously and said, "I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want you in it." I felt a lump in my throat. Those words, simple yet powerful, reaffirmed everything I had been feeling. I knew then that our bond wasn't just a fleeting infatuation. It was something deeper, something enduring. Winter, with its long nights and quiet mornings, gave us a space to grow together. It was in these moments, cooking together, laughing, sharing stories, comforting each other during hard days, that I realized how transformative our relationship had become. She had not only brought excitement into my life, but had also taught me patience, empathy, and the courage to embrace vulnerability. As the season wound down, I felt a sense of anticipation. Spring would come, bringing with it new experiences, challenges, and opportunities. But no matter what lay ahead, I knew one truth. Our connection was real, profound, and worth every risk. And I was ready to face whatever came next, as long as it meant facing it with her. Spring arrived with a burst of color, the town awakening after months of gray and snow. The streets smelled of fresh grass and blooming flowers, and everything seemed to carry a sense of possibility. For us, it was a season of exploration, new experiences, new adventures, and a deeper understanding of each other. One Saturday, she suggested a day trip to a nearby botanical garden. I remember driving with her, the windows down, music filling the car, feeling a sense of freedom I hadn't known before. At the garden, we wandered through winding paths, marveling at vibrant blooms and fragrant flowers. She pointed out the rare orchids she loved, explaining their symbolism and history. I listened, fascinated not just by her knowledge but by the passion in her voice. At one point, she grabbed my hand, intertwining our fingers, and I felt a surge of warmth and belonging. Over the next few weeks, we started incorporating more of each other's routines into our lives. I joined her for morning coffee at her favorite cafe, and she came with me to a few of my weekend hikes. She had a way of blending into my world without overwhelming it, while I felt accepted in hers. We were creating a rhythm together, one that felt natural yet exhilarating. But spring also brought moments of tension. I had begun considering my future more seriously, career decisions, life goals, and the realization that my feelings for her were more than just a youthful infatuation. I worried about how my ambitions might clash with hers, about whether our different life stages could align long-term. One evening, I brought up these concerns, expecting a defensive reaction. Instead, she listened patiently, her eyes calm and reassuring. "We'll figure it out," she said softly. "One step at a time." Her confidence grounded me, and for the first time, I felt a real sense of partnership, not just romance. One particularly memorable day, she surprised me with a small picnic by the lake at sunset. We spread a blanket on the grass, sharing sandwiches, fruit, and wine. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. We talked about everything and nothing, dreams, fears, music, books, our laughter echoing over the water. At some point, she leaned against me, resting her head on my shoulder. I held her close, realizing that these quiet, intimate moments were just as powerful as any grand gesture. Around this time, we also faced subtle external pressures. Friends and acquaintances occasionally made comments about our age difference, some teasing, some skeptical. At first, it stung, and I felt a twinge of defensiveness. But she handled it with grace, addressing it lightly or simply ignoring it. Her poise reminded me why I admired her so much, not just for her intelligence or beauty, but for her ability to navigate life's judgments with dignity. As our relationship grew, so did our emotional intimacy. We began sharing past regrets, childhood traumas, and the hidden parts of ourselves we usually kept guarded. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes the conversations were heavy, uncomfortable, but each discussion strengthened our trust and understanding. I started to see her not just as a romantic partner, but as a mentor, a guide, and a friend in ways I had never experienced before. By late spring, we had reached a point where our connection felt almost seamless. Daily texts, shared meals, walks through town, spontaneous outings. It all felt like a natural extension of our lives. I had grown, learned patience, empathy, and emotional resilience. And she, I realized, had chosen to invest in me, despite the challenges of our age difference. One evening, we attended a small local concert. She danced freely, laughing at herself, while I watched, mesmerized. At one point, she pulled me into the rhythm, and I realized how deeply intertwined our lives had become. We were no longer just two people enjoying each other's company. We were partners in the truest sense, learning from each other, challenging each other, and growing together. Spring closed with a quiet reflection on how far we had come. From tentative beginnings to this profound, deeply felt connection, our journey had been unexpected, intense, and transformative. I realized that love wasn't about age or experience. It was about commitment, understanding, and choosing someone, day after day, despite the uncertainties. And I knew, without a doubt, that I wanted to continue choosing her for every spring, summer, winter, and fall to come. Summer was blazing hot, and with it came a new sense of adventure for us. The town felt alive, full of festivals, outdoor concerts, and the endless hum of people enjoying the long days. For us, summer meant more time together, more spontaneous plans, and a deeper immersion into each other's worlds. One weekend, she suggested a trip to the nearby lake for a weekend getaway. We packed her car with snacks, a tent, and a cooler full of drinks. The drive itself was filled with laughter, playful teasing, and endless conversation. When we arrived, the lake was shimmering under the sun, the water clear and inviting. We spent the day swimming, kayaking, and lounging on the shore. I noticed how comfortable I felt around her, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. There was no pretense, no need to impress. We simply existed in each other's company. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple, we built a small fire. Sitting close, our shoulders touching, we shared stories from our pasts, mistakes, triumphs, and the pivotal moments that had shaped who we were. I realized, more than ever, how profoundly she had impacted my life. She had opened doors to experiences, feelings, and self-awareness that I never thought I'd encounter at this stage of my life. But summer also tested us. One day, we had a disagreement about future plans. I wanted to take a leap, consider moving for a new job opportunity, but she was hesitant, worried about the stability and the implications it could have for us. It was the first real fight we had, a clash of ambitions and caution. I felt frustration, fear, and self-doubt, while she wrestled with her own reservations. After hours of tense conversation, we reached a compromise, an understanding that respected both of our needs and fears. That night, lying together under the stars, I realized that love wasn't just about excitement or passion. It was about navigating challenges together, respecting boundaries, and finding balance. As the summer weeks passed, we continued to explore, to share, to grow. We attended small-town festivals, tried new restaurants, and even went on late-night drives just to watch the sunrise. Every day was filled with moments that were both ordinary and extraordinary. An inside joke, a gentle touch, a glance that said everything without words. Each memory strengthened the bond between us, weaving our lives together more tightly. One evening, we had a quiet moment at her apartment. She poured wine for us, and we sat on the balcony, overlooking the twinkling lights of the town. She took my hand and said softly, "I didn't expect to find someone like you at this stage of my life, but now I can't imagine not having you." I felt a lump in my throat. Those words crystallized everything I had been feeling: the love, the commitment, and the deep respect I had for her. I knew then that our relationship had transformed into something far beyond infatuation. It was a partnership rooted in trust, intimacy, and understanding. Summer closed with a sense of fulfillment and anticipation. We had faced challenges, celebrated victories, and shared countless moments of joy. I had grown into a version of myself that was more confident, more empathetic, and more aware of what I wanted from life. And she had shown me that love, even with age differences and societal expectations, could be genuine, nurturing, and enduring. As I reflect on those months, I realized that our story wasn't defined by grand gestures or dramatic events, but by the accumulation of small, meaningful moments. Every laugh, every touch, every conversation had brought us closer, shaping a relationship that felt real, profound, and unshakable. And as summer faded, I knew that whatever the future held, we had built a foundation strong enough to withstand anything. By the time autumn returned, I felt a deep sense of certainty about us. The years between us didn't feel like a gap anymore. They felt like a bridge, connecting two people who had chosen to grow together despite differences. Our relationship had evolved from tentative flirtation into something profoundly intimate, emotionally, mentally, and physically. One crisp morning, she suggested a trip to a small mountain town a few hours away. The drive was quiet at first, a calm reflection of how comfortable we had become together. She hummed softly to the music playing, and I watched her profile in the sunlight, realizing how deeply I had fallen for her. When we arrived, the mountains were painted with shades of amber and gold. We hiked to a lookout point, sitting side by side in silence, feeling the wind on our faces and the quiet intimacy of shared space. I realized then that love wasn't always about words. It was about presence, trust, and the unspoken understanding between two people. Back home, our routines became small rituals of comfort and joy. Morning coffee together, evening walks through the town, late-night talks about dreams and fears. They all wove a fabric of life that I had never known before. Her patience, wisdom, and care taught me how to slow down, appreciate small moments, and embrace vulnerability without fear. But it wasn't always smooth. Occasionally, insecurities crept in, the whispers of judgment from friends or the lingering fear that our different life stages might eventually pull us apart. We faced those moments with honesty, talking openly about doubts and fears, reminding each other of the strength of our bond. Each challenge, rather than weakening us, made our connection stronger, more resilient. One evening, she surprised me with a small home-cooked dinner, just the two of us. Candles flickered, music played softly, and she looked at me with those eyes that had first captured my attention months ago. "I want you to know," she said, voice gentle, "I'm in this fully, for the long haul." I felt a warmth spread through me that words couldn't contain. That night, as we sat together watching the fire in the hearth, I realized that our love had transformed both of us. It was no longer just a passionate, exciting beginning. It was a deep, enduring connection built on mutual respect, trust, and care. The following weeks were filled with quiet joys. We decorated her apartment for the holidays, went on spontaneous drives, shared laughter with friends, and spent evenings lost in conversation or reading side by side. Each day, I felt more certain that this relationship was unlike anything I had experienced before. It was both grounding and exhilarating, challenging yet comforting, a rare balance I hadn't thought possible. Looking back, I saw how far we had come. From that first tentative conversation in a bookstore, through the nervous coffee dates, the road trips, arguments, reconciliations, and countless quiet moments, we had built something real. I had grown, matured, and learned about love, patience, and vulnerability. She had shared her world, her wisdom, and her heart, and in doing so had transformed mine. On a quiet night, as I walked home under the soft glow of streetlights, I realized that the age difference, the uncertainties, the challenges, they all faded in comparison to what we had. Our relationship wasn't defined by numbers or society's expectations. It was defined by connection, choice, and devotion. And I knew, without a doubt, that I wanted her in my life. Not just for this season, not just for this year, but for as long as we could be together. Our journey had been unexpected, challenging, and beautiful, and I felt grateful for every moment, every laugh, every tear, and every heartbeat that had led us to this point. Because love, real love, wasn't perfect. It wasn't without doubt or difficulty. But with her, it felt like home. And I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be.